When we open up LibreOffice Base, it takes us back to the Database Wizard dialog box that we saw in video 1. From here, we can either create a new database or open an existing database file. Selecting that shows us our ODB01 employees file that we created in video 1. But we're not going to open that file. We want to create a new database. I'm selecting Create a New Database and clicking Next. I'm going to leave these defaults as they are. So we are going to register this database, although, as I said in the previous video, it's not going to make any difference. We can always register it or unregister it later as needed. Let's finish. We need to give this a name. I'm going to give this ODB02 employees and save it to our desktop. This time we're going to take a look at Use Wizard to create table. In our description we see choose from a selection of business and personal table samples, which you customize to create a table. Clicking that, this brings us to the Table Wizard dialog box. In here we've got two categories, business and personal. Business is selected, and the first table found alphabetically is listed assets. Let's try personal. From here we see accounts. Clicking our tables drop down, we see that we could have a CD collection, a DVD collection, library, maybe if you've got a lot of books. Selecting the library just by clicking on it shows us the available fields that it gives us. Well, those are more like suggested fields. We could add or delete them or change them as we like. Let's go back to the business category because we want to make an employees database. Looking in our sample tables, they even have an employees database and some suggested fields. Our first field was an employee ID. We have one right here, so I'm going to select that. And the rest, I'm going to bring back that Calc datasheet that has the rest of the fields listed on it. So now we need a last name, and then a first name, and now we need gender. And I don't see gender in here. Let's check one of the other tables. We've got contacts. Maybe it's in there. No, I don't see gender there. How about in customers? No, I don't see it in here either. But just to show that we can add a field from another database, I'm going to add title. Let's go over in the personal. I can add a field from here if I like. Let's go to CD collection, and I'll put record label. Now I want to go back to business and back to the employees table and see if they've got a start date and end date. They've got a date hired. We'll use that. Since I don't see an end date, I'm just going to throw in birth date. We should have a phone number, address, city, and we can select these by holding down Control to bring in the state or province, and also the zip or postal code, adding them over. But it didn't put them in the order I wanted, so let me take the postal code out and now add it back in, and it adds it at the bottom. We then have department and group, and since we don't see a group in here, I'm going to leave it off and add it in our next step. Clicking Next brings us to the Set Field Types and Formats. In the table we created in video 1, we had a dash between employee and ID. We also made this one an auto value. Our last name, we had a space between last and name. Same with first name. Oh, but we also made these required fields because we need to have a name if we're going to give them an employee number. After that, we had something called gender and not title. So to remove title, I'm going to come down to this minus sign, and that deletes that out. Under record label, well, we didn't have a record label. We had something called gender. So let's change this to gender. And instead of varchar, we had a fixed character and made this 6. Now instead of date hired, we have start date. The next one, end date. Phone number, that one I made fixed and made that a value of 14. Address, and we will notice that these lengths are different. This one has a length of 200. That's not going to make a big difference here, so I'm going to leave it alone. Same with city, state or province. We are going to change this name back down to just state. Postal code, we'll change this to zip. Department's good. And we had one more called group. To add a field here, we come down to the plus sign. We use the minus to remove one. We'll use the plus to add one. It comes with the default name of field. I'm going to change this to group. And these arrows right here, if I wanted to move this up, I would just use the arrow up, bring it back down, and I want it at the bottom, so we're all set. Going on to next. Now it's asking us for a primary key. We'll look at this more in future tutorials. For now, we just need to remember that our employee ID is going to be our primary key. And every employee must have a unique number. So we're going to select the second one, use an existing field of employee ID, and it automatically checks the auto value for us. Although we want the second one, let's take a look at the first one. It says automatically add a primary key. What this will do, we'll just add another field, call it ID, and give it the auto value, just like we're doing with the key that we have. Another option is to define a primary key as a combination of several fields. We may want to have like first and last name as a primary key, but since so many people have the same last name or their name may change, it's better off to go with a number, at least in this case. So we're going to stick with the employee ID as a primary key. And now let's go to the next screen. What do we want to name it? Employees is fine. And insert data immediately. Let's go with that. So I will click Finish. In the previous video, this is where I entered all the data. It looks like the employee ID did not get the auto value that I wanted. So I am going to edit this, select the employee ID, and change this to auto value yes. Save it, and we should be good.